Tonight's lecture is going to be about the dimensions of public speaking. It's based on my book called Dimensions of Public Speaking, and it's also relevant to this course and to the ebook that you're learning from. I want to mention to you that it's important as a speaker that you come into the room that you're going to speak before the speech and look at the empty room. Get used to it. Also make sure that the equipment is there that you're expecting to be there. If you're going to be giving a presentation using a visual aid like PowerPoint, you want to make sure that the computers are there. If somebody was supposed to bring a laptop or it's not compatible with a Mac, you need to find all that out before you get there. So, test the equipment before you come in, and then make sure that they have the cords and whatever's necessary. You also want to make sure that the temperature of the room is good, how many seats are in the room. If you have handouts, you want to know how many handouts to bring. So there are some preparation involved. For a course like this, you should still arrive early. If you have something on a flash drive or you emailed yourself the visual, get to class early and put it on the desktop. That's usually appropriate for conferences as well. If you go to an academic conference, show up early, ask whoever's got the computer, could I put my presentation on your desktop, and then it'll be all ready to go as soon as you get up in front of the audience. It's ready to go, very smooth. And you want to make sure it opens up correctly too. Sometimes it fails. So you want to make sure that you have that, and you have a contingency plan if that happens. Okay, so the speech begins, and a lot of speakers think that the speech begins when you stand in front of the audience, that the audience forms their view of you when you actually get up here at the lectern. There's no lectern here, but there's usually a stand. You might think that's when my audience is going to start evaluating me. Not actually. Let me go ahead and demonstrate something for you, okay? This is the bad version, all right? Hello. My name is Shane Gunderson, and I'm here to tell you all about the 3 dimensions of public speaking: organization, content, and delivery. That's the bad version. Good evening, everyone. Hello, tonight's presentation is going to be on the dimensions of public speaking. My name is Shane Gunderson, and welcome to our presentation tonight. So hopefully you've seen the difference in the 2. The first one was clumsy, poor eye contact from the beginning. I was nervous, I was reading. Probably couldn't tell I was reading, but I was reading from a script. Poor eye contact, I rushed right into it. Don't be afraid to come up to the podium or the lectern and take a pause. Breathe, look at everybody, smile, appear friendly from the very beginning. Also, when you come into the room, you're being evaluated from the moment that they see you. A lot of times you'll sit in the audience, and then the moderator will say, and our next speaker is, so when you see them announce you, you come up, they're going to look at you at the table. And if you're at the table like a mess with stuff scattered, falling out of your pockets, if you have a diaper bag, things falling out of it, and you come up, it's sloppy. And in a job interview, the same thing. So try to have everything nice and neat and, in a briefcase, and then you just walk in very confidently, smile at the audience, and don't be in a rush, and then, be poised and stand confidently. Prepare. So, dimensions of public speaking, that there's 3 dimensions. The first dimension is organization. You're going to be evaluated on how well you organize your speech. What are the 3 parts of a speech? Does anybody know?
Intro, body, and conclusion.
Intro, body, conclusion. Very good. So in an introduction, what are the parts of an introduction that we would expect a speaker to include in an introduction to make it seem organized?
Attention getter, thesis.
An attention getter, can somebody give me an example?
A question.
You might ask the audience a question, and sometimes it's a hypothetical question or a rhetorical question that doesn't really need a response. Or it's an overt response question where I would say, could I see a show of hands of how many of you smoke? And then you would raise your hand. And I'd usually make a comment about, well, whether you smoke or not, my speech is going to relate to you tonight. So an attention getter is included usually in a speech. And then also a thesis somebody mentioned. And in persuasive speaking, it's called a claim. And there's usually some other parts to an intro, which would mean a purpose statement, maybe a preview of what you're going to cover. So there's some more parts that would make it appear very organized. Under no circumstances should you get up and say, the purpose of my speech tonight is. It's very basic. It's very elementary. So try to be more creative and original. In a body, to make the body of the speech more organized, what are some methods that a speaker can use to make the body appear more organized? Say it a little bit louder.
You go in order what you want to say.
Sure, there's different patterns of organization. You're going to learn about them all in here. I'll go over a few for you. There's a topical outline, or topical method. There's chronological. For the personal experience narrative speech that you're going to be giving, it's probably going to be this method of chronological for that type of storytelling speech. There's, for persuasive speaking, you have Monroe's motivated sequence, and you're going to learn about that in here. There's more choices too, like compare and contrast, and we'll be learning about more methods. It's important for you to know that for the body to appear organized, you need to also use transitions and signposts. Transitions and signposts. A signpost would be a word like this, next, or the first point I would like to make, or the first step. That really helps in a chronological speech to say the first step, and then you would say the second step, and so forth. Because that helps us follow your direction of where you're going. And in your introduction, to appear better organized, you can say, I'm going to teach you 3 steps to changing the oil in your car. The first step is to buy the right products. And then you would talk about that. And then all of a sudden your organization changes and you'd say, now the second step to changing the oil in your car is, so that's called a signpost. If you're not talking about points, steps, stages, reasons, you're not falling asleep up there, are you? Principles. If you're trying to explain a concept to somebody or a theory, you might say, there's 3 concepts I want to share with you. And you would just go through each one individually. And then that's signpost. But then in the conclusion, signpost is usually when you say in conclusion. That signals your audience that you're about to wrap up. Now for transitions, a transition tells the audience what you just covered and what you're getting ready to cover. So it would usually be written something like this. Now that I explained which products to buy, I won't write it out, which products to buy, we will now cover how to mix the ingredients. Where we just went, where we're going. Those help with organization when you're in the body of your speech. The conclusion, what are some important things to include in a conclusion? Have any of you read ahead in the book?
I know you restate your thesis.
Very good, very good. You've been reading the book. For an informative speech, you want to restate the thesis or actually the main points. Why do we do this? Say it louder. To reinforce and to get them to remember the main points. Don't be afraid to be redundant in an informative speech. You tell them in the introduction that you're going to teach them the 3 steps on how to bake a cake, go through the process. At the end, I just want to remind you the 3 steps were, step number 1 was to buy the right product, step number 2 is to mix them for this amount of time, and the 3rd was to bake it in an oven, whatever degrees, and my special secret to baking a cake, remember what it was again? And that can be your tricky little ending, I shouldn't say tricky, but your creative ending. There's different endings. We'll also learn in here about how to give some creative endings.
Call to action.
A call to action for persuasive speaking, that was really good. For Monroe's motivated sequence in a persuasive speech, we have, it's called an action step, which is the last step in Monroe's motivated sequence to get your audience to take action in a persuasive speech. That's very good. So in an informative speech, the conclusion means restating your main points, but in a persuasive speech, it means asking for an action from your audience. And that's not usually an action like, it's now your job to find world peace. It's usually, now you can call your legislator, here's the phone number, or please go to this website, and then you have it visually up there for them to go to, or now I want you to sign my petition, and it's in the back of the room. So that's the type of action usually in a persuasive speech. So these are all the points for organization. The second dimension that you'll be evaluated on is content. Content has to do with what you choose to include, usually in the body of your speech. Can anybody give me examples of what content would matter? The first bit of content you have to decide on is what your topic's going to be. Whenever I ask students after they hear a speech, what did you like about the speech? 9 times out of 10, they say it was a good topic. And I say, why? Well, I'm interested in that topic. Okay, so it mattered. Did they present in a certain way that interests you? Would you present it the same way? So what you'll start to do is dissect how effective speeches include main points. Main points. I want you to remember this. You can only cover 2 to 4 main points. In a class like this, a speech like this, a short speech. When I say short, a speech under 15 minutes, don't try to cover more than 2 to 4 main points. Think of an outline. Think about when you've written papers for your English class. A main point is one of those large Roman numeral 1, large Roman numeral 2, and then you have to build underneath of each main point subpoints. So not only does the content have to have well-developed main points, it needs to have well-developed subpoints. And usually, you can't have just one subpoint under each main point. You need to have at least 2. So you need to have at least 2 subpoints. What do you think that we need to do to build the body of a speech when we're stating a main point? What are these subpoints made up of? Examples. You guys are smart. Examples. And you'll learn from this course that there's different types of examples. There's narratives, storytelling, or there's statistics. So this can be stories, statistics. What else?
Anecdotes.
Anecdotes, which are very similar to stories.
I'm sorry.
Quotes. Famous quotes sometimes. Famous claims. These are real good. Also, I want to mention to you, see, you would make a statement and then you need to back it up with evidence. So you would probably do your research in the library or on the internet to find all this, or just a story to bring us in. For your personal experience speech, usually for the personal experience speech, you would say, I woke up this morning and I knew it was going to be a bad day. And then that was the main point for that section of the speech. Well, then you have to build on why it was a bad day. So you would go through usually stories of all the things that went wrong that morning. And then you get to, the afternoon, that would be main point number 2, and you'd have to build on why the afternoon was bad. Okay, so another thing that you would need to include that relates to content is visual aids. Visual aids are the PowerPoints, the posters. It could be a real object, it could be a guitar, it could be a musical instrument if you're demonstrating how to play an instrument. What other type of visuals? Did I cover most of them? Try not to bring any live animals in, or don't bring any humans in. So the visual aids, what's key with a visual aid is that you should always put it away from you. You should never hold it under your chin or hold it because it'll show how nervous you are. Try to put it away from you and refer to it. Also, when you pick photographs, that's what another visual, photographs. When you select photographs to put into your PowerPoint or for your visual, make sure that the content is relevant to your audience. Okay, that means you wouldn't pick photographs of senior citizens for this group. That won't relate to them. There's communication going on with your content. It always has to match your audience. So if you're promoting that we should all go to Mexico on a vacation, you would pick photographs of people having a good time that match your audience, what they look like, which means demographics, age, all that. Also, you would need to consider that you don't want to offend your audience, so make sure your content is not offensive. I think we pretty much covered the content of what you would be evaluated on. Audience relevancy is also very important. I didn't write that up here. Let me just go ahead. Make sure that it's relevant. All of your selection of your statistics, everything has to be relevant to the audience. Very, very important. Audience has to. You customize every example. If you're talking about crime for this audience, it needs to be based on Miami crime, South Florida crime, not New York crime, unless you're doing a comparison. But all of your statistics should be recent, relevant to this area, and ethical. Make sure that it's not lying and not made up. So that was 2 dimensions that we covered so far. What were the 2 dimensions so far? So organization we covered, and then we covered content. And now we're going to cover the 3rd, which is delivery. Can anyone tell that delivery is my favorite? Tonight we're going to practice more delivery. And what is delivery? Say it a little bit louder. How you present it, how with
body language.
So body gestures. What else?
Speed of your voice.
Eye contact. What else?
Your engagement with the audience.
Your.
Like how you engage with the audience.
It's more. You want to engage. That's a positive thing, but it's hard to evaluate somebody just saying yes, you engage the audience. You need to actually witness some of this. Voice.
The tone.
The tone. So there's actually a lot about voice. Let's go through them real quick.
Speed.
Tone of voice. What else?
Speed.
The pace.
Tempo.
What else?
Clarity.
Word choice.
Clarity would mean the way that you pronounce words. Enunciation.
Articulation.
articulation. I think that's similar. So yes, but also the volume of your voice and the pitch, as we learned from the fables.
What about vocabulary?
The vocabulary, you know what, that actually goes back to content. I didn't cover that. With content, your language is actually important to content. Sorry, I missed that one, but you need to always use the language appropriate for the audience for their education level. And if it's a technical audience, highly technical with science and all that, make sure that you use the proper science terms. And you don't want to talk over your audience's head. Make sure that you pick your words so that they understand. So then we're still talking about delivery. We covered voice pretty well. What are the body gestures that are good? You had your hand up.
I was going to say like appearance or attire.
The clothing. That's good. All right. What does clothing communicate? Professional, it could be professional. We tend to shut down when people are looking sloppily dressed, dirty. They're wearing t-shirts with messages that are offensive. But then sometimes we connect with them if they're wearing sports garb that, clothing that we relate to, where they're a fan of a team that we like. Confidence. So, it depends on the setting on how you should be dressed.
Would stuttering or those kinds of things would affect your voice?
I'm glad you brought that up. Another important aspect of voice that you will be graded on is vocal variety. And what you need to be afraid of and what you don't want to do is have bad pauses. Can you tell me what those bad pauses are? These are those bad pauses or bad connectors. But there's vocal variety that's good. It's okay to have some pauses if you're trying to emphasize a certain point. You had your hand up?
Yeah, but for bad pauses within just like silence, when you forget something, you just stay on.
Sure, if you forget your thoughts, that's a bad pause. But if you are trying to make a dramatic point, if I was to say, that morning was the worst day of my life, you want to know why? That's building suspense. That's a good pause, okay? So you don't want to have too fast-paced of your sentences going fast when you're trying to create a dramatic effect unless it's building to a climax.
How would you recover from a bad pause, like if you forget something, like your words?
I can just tell you what not to do. Never apologize. That draws more attention to your mistake. You just go on. You just go on. If you get tripped up, don't try to memorize your speech. You want to have extemporaneous voice delivery. Don't read, don't memorize. Instead, be conversational, the way that I am in this lecture. We've really covered voice a lot. The vocal variety, though, is a very important value that I'm going to grade you on, and I'm going to say your voice was monotone, not good. You got up and you read from the page, it was monotone. Instead, I want you to raise your voice sometimes, lower your voice sometimes. I want you to cause some dramatic passion. I want to know that you really feel what you're saying. I want you to be angry when you're telling me about a story that you were bothered, you were annoyed. We're going to have an exercise today to help you work on that. Okay, let's talk about eye contact. Why is it good to have eye contact with your audience?
It keeps you and the audience connected.
What were you going to say?
Creates like trust.
Trust. You're both right. So it creates a bond with your audience. It creates trust. I don't think you would want me to do this the whole time I'm talking to you and say, what's next? Anybody? Anybody? Was it the Ferris Bueller's Day Off? The professor or the teacher there, he goes through his lecture in a very monotone voice. He says, anybody, anybody? And then he just goes on. So eye contact builds trust with your audience. You're more credible. The clothing we covered, the body gestures. I want to show you how your gestures should be when you're speaking up here. Let me find a note card. So I'm going to let you, with your speeches, have note cards with your main points on them. So try to have one hand free. And it's okay to glance down at them and shift. And then try to do this once in a while. It's also good when you're speaking to have your palms up. It's always safe to have your palms up. Open position. It shows that you're kind, you're listening. This is bad. 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 Shutting off the audience, you're defensive, you're mean. You know, Hillary Clinton, she used to give speeches like this with her posture. It's really not good. Instead, you try to be poised and friendly. You also, a lot of people pace and they go back and forth. Do this, that's not good. Rattle. Or sit here with them. So it's all distracting. All that's distracting. So try to just stand poised, and it's okay if you want to make a strong point if you're running for office or something, to close your fist and do this and say, "My fellow Americans, I want you to know the following." Okay, but don't do this, because in this culture, it's very threatening. In some cultures, it's threatening to do this, but in America, it's not. It's friendly. Joke. Okay. See, and all this is nonverbals. You just threw me off with your nonverbal. So these are all ways of communicating non-verbally. So even when you say the words, you want to reinforce the words with the right gesture. We covered this in the previous lecture. If I said to you, go upstairs, you would go downstairs, because we tend to look at the nonverbal first. How's everybody doing today? I'm fine. We know you're not fine when you answer that way. And the way that you also would reinforce the message, if I was telling you about my favorite holiday, opening up presents, I should be joyful and smiling when I'm doing that, right? I don't want to be frowning. A lot of students, I just got done grading online speeches where students had to explain themselves, what their 10 words are that describes them. They said, "I'm really happy, I tell a lot of jokes." That was exactly how they said it.
Maybe that was a joke.
It wasn't like Stephen Wright. It wasn't like a Stephen Wright type of delivery. It was not a deadpan delivery. It was really, they were being serious, that they were fun. Silly. I'm very silly. And they didn't even smile or anything. This went right to the next sentence. It would be okay if you said that and you let us, a pause, but then you grinned or you smiled. I actually had a student last semester that reminded me of, was it Ellen DeGeneres, and the way that she would deliver a speech. She would say something really serious, but under her breath she would say the opposite. I think that's Ellen DeGeneres that does that. There's a lot of comedians that, it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. I really can't stand being here. And she did that the whole time with her speech and had us rolling. The use of comedy also is important if you can work it in. It may not be your style, but if you can work in some comedy, it's best to use self-deprecating humor, which means making fun of yourself is okay. It's not usually good to ridicule your audience or anybody, any group of people. It's not usually good to do that. Where a lot of the exceptions are is in a toast at a wedding. You might have the toast to the groom, to the bride, and you do have a lot of what I would say inappropriate comments made about somebody's promiscuity or bad traits, and they think they're doing it in fun, but a lot of it ends up getting interpreted poorly by the audience, and they don't think much of you as the person giving the toast or the groom or the bride that you've made fun of. So I try to teach students if you do it, it has to be really a lighthearted joke, and it usually has to involve more than one person in the room so that you're not picking on somebody. So try to, have your humor only related to making fun of yourself if you use it. So we've now covered the 3 dimensions pretty well. What are they again? Organization, content, and delivery. And that'll be how you're scored on your speeches, all of them. And that is in line with the National Communication Association's core competencies. They evaluate speakers the same way on the national level for all communication courses.